Welcome back to the Sponsor's Voice podcast. This month we are talking about community wealth building with Paul Morris and Anthea Coulter. Thanks for joining us, and let's get straight into the episode. So, welcome back to the Sponsor's Voice podcast. Today we have Paul Morris joining us from Clackmannanshire Council. Paul Morris is here to discuss economic development with us, but more specifically to talk about community wealth building. Now, Paul, you're an economic development strategy officer at the council. So just before we get started with talking about community wealth building, can you give us a little bit of background? What do you do within the council? A little bit of your background as to how you got here at the same time.
Sure, thanks, Ali. I've been in Clackmannanshire Council now since October 22. Prior to that, I was with the City Region Deal Programme Management Office. I was the project manager there. Prior to that, I had 15 years in Glasgow, working for the council there. I had 10 years working with elected members in the council. And after that, I had 5 years working in economic development around economic and social initiatives with the Cooperative and Social Enterprise Fund, supporting co-ops and social enterprises. I also worked with social enterprises and co-ops directly, developing the social enterprise strategy for the city. Prior to that, I worked for Scottish Enterprise, and before that, I actually worked in Clackmannanshire Council for the East of Scotland European Consortium.
So you're back?
Yes, I'm back.
Fantastic. Now, Paul, we're here to talk about community wealth building, and we will get into the detail, but for our listeners, let's just take things very much back to basics. So can you give us an idea about what community wealth building is, the background to where it came from?
Well, it came from America. It was devised some time ago in Cleveland, Ohio. For our purposes, it was picked up by the Centre for Local Economic Strategies, which is an organisation based in Manchester. And they've been working for some time to introduce community wealth building to the UK more widely, drawing on examples from America and places like the Basque Country to help local communities and councils and regions to strengthen their community wealth building activity. I'm sure we'll come on to community wealth building and what it means, but CLES have been a main driver in that for the last 15 to 20 years.
Yeah, okay. And so what are the principles that sit behind community wealth building? What's it designed to do?
Well, there are 5 key principles. Plural ownership of the economy, which is about democratising the economy and making it more open to all levels of the population. Making financial power work for local places. That's really about using the budgets that are available and trying to make them more effective for the local communities. Fair employment and just labour markets. Now, that's something that I think we'll come on to as we start to discuss what's happening in Clackmannanshire. Yep. Progressive procurement of goods and services. That's something that is absolutely critical to community wealth building and its implementation in the area, because it's about how the council, public agencies in Clackmannanshire and large employers, larger businesses, use their spend and influence the purchasing of services in the area. And finally, socially productive use of land and assets, which is really about making sure that the population more widely have got an investment, a physical and personal investment in the land and assets that are available in the community.
Okay, so these 5 key principles then, are they a radical departure from what you would usually be doing within economic development?
It's a new way of working. Okay. It's a new way of focusing the work that is being undertaken. And it's more about economic development rolling out across all aspects of the work of the council than it is about economic development as a single thing. Yeah. Okay. So it's really about working with all partners and all colleagues across the council to make them aware of the benefits and opportunities that are there and make them recognise some of the things that they've been doing that have already effectively been covering community wealth building and expanding on those.
Yeah. Okay. So it's kind of that shared approach.
Yeah.
So that's about kind of collaboration. And we've talked in other podcasts about the collaborative efforts that are going on. So we talked about sustainability in our very first podcast, where you have a sustainability team, but yet it relies on everybody at the council and that kind of collaborative effort to really realise the outcomes that are intended.
That's right.
Further on down the line.
That's right. So this is really about working together.
Fantastic. So one last bit then when we're talking about the background. So this is happening in Clackmannanshire. Is this approach being taken elsewhere within Scotland?
It is. There are 5 pilot areas which are currently under a pilot programme from the Scottish Government. Clackmannanshire is one, North Ayrshire is another, Dundee, I think, is one. There is a 4th, and then the 5th one is the Glasgow City Region area, which is interesting because initially they only looked at 2 of the 5 pillars. They may be looking at more of them now, but at the time when the pilots were set up, they only looked at 2. I can't remember the 5th one.
It's always hard to remember a list, especially when you're filming a podcast.
Yeah, there's always one.
It's an under pressure situation. That's absolutely fine. So we've got the background then. So let's talk a little bit about that Clackmannanshire context. So what does community wealth building mean for Clackmannanshire? But I guess more specifically, what's happening right now as well?
Well, the pilot was arranged around about 2020, and in late 2020, the council in partnership with the Centre for Local Economic Strategies devised an action plan for Clackmannanshire. It's an incredibly detailed document. It's available online if anyone wants to see. I'm looking at the microphone.
Yep, that's fine.
That's the world.
We'll put the note. We'll put it in the show notes. That's okay.
So that was launched in late 2020. It's a very detailed document, but what it does do is provide 21 actions for the area to roll out community wealth building in Clackmannanshire. Yep. Now, they were actually broken down into 6 themes. The 6th one was about making Clackmannanshire a community wealth building area, but essentially it's underneath these 5 pillars. And since then, myself, since October, and previous colleagues have been working to deliver those 21 actions.
So is that just council employees delivering those 21 actions, or is that...
Well, it's a very good question, actually. Initially, the action plan is very council heavy. Yeah. But one of the things that it asked the council and the wider partnership to do through the Clackmannanshire Alliance was to develop an anchor partnership, which brings together larger public agencies. So an anchor organisation is a large organisation in terms of spend, or in terms of employment, or in terms of resources drawn from an area. So the anchor partnership is composed of the council, public agencies like Scottish Enterprise, Skills Development Scotland, the NHS, 3 local housing associations, a business called Ceteris, who are a property management company, but also run Business Gateway contract for the area, and a number of companies who are actually multinationals. So we've got OI, who are the glass manufacturers, and Diageo. Everyone knows Diageo. Yep. So we've got a lot of organisations around the table with a lot of spending power. And we've reconstituted that anchor partnership, which recently met again. And our plan is to try to develop a new set of actions which encompasses a wider group of organisations and people. So the 21 actions that we had were primarily, not exclusively, but primarily focused on the council and its work.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so what are some examples of then? So you have this kind of collaborative partnership through the anchors. What are some examples of what's happening in Clackmannanshire at the moment?
Well, we've got some good examples of things that are going on. We published our progress report. It's called a progress report because it was supposed to be an annual report, but we didn't have a year one annual report. So the progress report was published and put before council in March 23, and it showed progress towards the 21 actions that were already laid out in the action plan. So we've actually, and this is it's a rolling thing, but in terms of a red, amber, green scale, we had 10 where we felt that we had achieved it already, but we're still working to continue with those. We had another 6 which were amber, where we had made some progress but not enough, and we had 5 that were red that we hadn't started on, or that we hadn't made enough progress to justify an amber. So some of the things that we've done really well are centred around procurement. Yep. In terms of procurement spend in the area, this is all available in annual reports, which can be accessed on the council's website as well. Over the past 5 years, we've moved from procurement spend in Clackmannanshire around, I think it's 15 or 16% of the spend from the council was initially in Clackmannanshire, but over the last 5 years, it's increased by 9% to around 25 or 26%. Yeah. And when you consider the size of Clackmannanshire and what is actually available in the county, that's actually a pretty impressive increase over the last 5 years.
And so what does that achieve then? So we're talking about procurement, which is buying things,
goods and services.
Buying goods and services. So if that's increasing in percentage, so what 9% you said, what impact does that have? What's the benefit of that?
Well, put simply, it's more spend in the area, which generates more employment. It generates more pounds in people's pockets, and that results directly from the spend of the council. That's purely for Clackmannanshire, but looking more widely to the Forth Valley or Greater Clackmannanshire, the spend there has actually increased to 40% over 5 years.
Yeah.
So when you think about Clackmannanshire, people who live and work here, that's only one part of it. There are people who live in Clackmannanshire who work in Stirling or Falkirk or those council areas. And likewise, there are businesses that are owned by people who live in Clackmannanshire but are operated in other places. So to find that 40% of the council's total spend actually goes to the wider Forth Valley means that there's a very real chance that that money is now increasingly finding its way back into Clackmannanshire.
Yeah, so it's almost like cyclical, isn't it?
Exactly,
Yeah.
it's a virtuous circle. So as you increase the spend locally, you increase the incomes locally, and as you increase the incomes locally, you can potentially then increase the economic output, the economic potential of Clackmannanshire.
That's fantastic to hear them. So it's real benefits. Have there been any specific projects through community wealth building or using that technique that you've seen that have had really good outcomes associated with them?
Well, some of the work around asset transfers, and I think we'll be speaking to some other people today who might be able to provide you more information on that. For example, around the transfer of assets.
So what do we mean by transfer of assets? Let's break that down a bit.
So, for example, where there's a council building, or a building for another public agency, and that building is then moved over to community control, or for the use of a social enterprise or a cooperative or something similar. So we've got a couple of examples where community assets have been moved across. So when we talk about community assets, things like the Civic Centre in Tullabuddy or the Hive in Dollar, which was previously the Dollar Civic Centre. A lot of work was undertaken with organisations like the Development Trust Association in Scotland to help those communities to then take those buildings on. And there were obviously difficulties at the time when they were taken over, but those facilities were wanted by the community. And with support, they've been able to take them on and make them viable buildings for their own use. Likewise with the Alloa Hub, that is part of the Living Alloa project. Those were disused toilets, and they've now been turned into a fantastic local resource.
Brilliant.
Which is a great, it's almost like a welcome to Alloa if you come off the train.
Yeah, which I think I'm going to be visiting in the next 10, 15 minutes for the second half of our podcast, which will be
I'm a shareholder in it, so good luck.
Fantastic. So let's finish off then. Last point for today. So we've had a good idea about the background to community wealth building, what it's about, why we're really getting involved with it, and also some really good benefits that you've been able to describe. What's next? What's the future?
Well, after the publication of the progress report, in that we had next steps. So we're looking basically to push on further with those actions which haven't been taken on, but we're also looking to consult on how we can have a new set of actions which brings in wider partners and make sure that it's a genuinely council area-wide plan to deliver community wealth building across the community in a meaningful way.
Fantastic. Well, it sounds like really exciting work. Paul, thank you for joining the Sponsors Voice podcast today. And we'll be back after the break at the Alloa Hub. Thank you. Okay, welcome back to the Sponsors Voice podcast. Joining us for the second half of our podcast today, we have Anthea Coulter, one of the directors of the Alloa Hub. So thank you for coming along today.
Thanks very much for having me.
It's fantastic to be somewhere else apart from the 5th floor meeting room in Kilncraigs for once for me, so it's fantastic to be down here. Anthea, we've been talking a little bit in the first half with Paul Morris from the council about community wealth building, and so we're now here to put a little bit more context on that, and we've got a real life living example that we're sitting in today, which is great to see. But again, as always, back to basics. Can you give me a little bit about what it means to be a director of Alloa Hub?
It's great. It's great to be part of this whole project right from the very start. I mean, so there was 4 founding directors of the organisation that now runs it. But I think you need to track back to 2018. That's when we really start the process.
Yeah.
And it was really it was the beginning of the Alloa First Business Improvement District elected period. So we wanted to try and create a baseline. I'm also a director and represent the third sector as part of that organisation as well. So that's all the third sector, charity shops, charities that are based in the town centre. So I wanted to help create a baseline. So we use something called the Place Standard tool. So it's a nationally recognised consultation tool. It has 14 themes, and it offers both a qualitative, so you get, what people want to say, what people feel about a town centre, what needs to change. So that very similar to a normal consultation. But you also have a scoring mechanism from 1 to 7. And that then creates a baseline that you can use to identify what are the worst performing areas of a town centre, for example, or any place, and what are the best performing. And what we did was we did that process, and it identified in particular safety was an issue.
Yeah.
Care and maintenance was an issue. Work and local economy, there was a perception that wasn't as strong. And also the other one was influence and sense of control, which was an interesting one because that's about people having a voice. So ironically, they were raising that they didn't feel that they'd had a voice in the past. So we wanted to see if we could improve that. So the 4 areas that we identified were through this consultation that they were the weakest in a sense for the town centre. So at that point, we then said, right, well, what are the assets that we have around the table? So we've got a third sector, very vibrant, very thriving. What can we do to enhance? What resources can we pool? What can Alloa First, that actually brings in quite a lot of money from the businesses. They put money into the town centre. What can they put into the mix? What can the council put into the mix? And what other resources can we bring to the table to really tackle these things? So for example, the Alloa First, the Business Improvement District, invested in 18 CCTV camera stations around the town. Huge investment, working alongside Clackmannanshire Police. So they have the logins, a big track TV screen with everything going on around the town centre. And that was part of their investment. The third sector created something called Alloa and Bloom. It's a Bloom group. And we took over some of the new planters. We got planters from George Street in Edinburgh. We've had planters from the roundabouts moved by Clackmannanshire Council. The last 2 of those happened last weekend, so that's really exciting. And that's a volunteer group, meets once a week, and has brought 2 golds, Keep Scotland Beautiful golds in the last 2 weeks. So these are things that were done prior to ever having a pot of money, a larger pot of money. But then the Scottish Government, through part of the recovery after COVID, came up with something called the Scotland's Towns Fund. And because there already had this consultation had happened, we were able to say, look, there's an opportunity here for us to put some more resources into the town centre. And one of the key things that came out of the consultation, not in the quantitative stuff or the themes, but people wanted their public toilet back. They said, we are missing our public toilet, we want our loo back. The Spear Centre is too far to go for an older person they're coming in by bus and they're just walking around the town. And we said, fair enough, okay, well, let's look at that. Alongside that, we were obviously wanting to develop, I think, a more tourist attraction, a tourist offer, let's say, for Clackmannanshire. It's often forgotten. You've got the Kelpies, you've got Stirling with the castle and Wallace Monument, you've got Fife has got everything that's going on. Clackmannanshire kind of gets lost in the midst, and we wanted to try and really develop that as an offer. And what would that look like? Discover Clacks has really been part of these discussions all the way along as well, which is the business and third sector community around tourism. So working together, we said, right, well, what could we do with this potential money that's coming from the Scottish Government? And that's when we came up with what's called the Living Alloa project, because in amongst the mix of that is also Primrose Street has been built as well.
That's
so
just
we've got
across the road from us.
Across the road from us. So 65 new units opening up for people who are over 55 with an enduring health condition. So again, we're looking at that, how do we give them that influence and sense of control? How do we make them feel welcome into Alloa? And that was, all these things came to the mix. So active travel, tourism, how do we promote our town better? How do we bring a toilet back into the town that somebody can pay for? And how do we also make it a welcoming place that can be used by local residents? So all of that mix came to the fore, and we came up with a number of different options around the town centre. Included reducing the flow of traffic coming into the town centre on King Street, so that making it a bit safer for the new residents. We opened up Bank Street into a really nice social area because it had large, horrible sort of 1970s concrete planters. One of the real aspects we looked at was the safety aspect. So going through the TSB lane, what we call the TSB lane, it's not actually got a name, so that's coming next, I think. We're going to try and name it or do a competition. How can we open that up, make it feel safer? Because that's the entrance into the town centre for a lot of people coming from the railway station.
Because you've got the graffiti on the side there as well as you go towards that TSB lane, I suppose.
Well,
as well.
The
murals.
Yes.
The murals.
I don't think we call that graffiti.
Yeah,
mural.
They are a lot nicer than
Yeah. So that was all part of it. That was funding through a builder. You know, so when people do a new housing estate, they give some money towards an art project.
Because that's one thing you keep saying we as well, which is lovely to hear as well. So because quite often when people see like a new housing development go up, they see planters, they might assume, well, that's the council that's done that, but it's more than that, isn't it? It's more of a collaborative effort.
It is. It's the sort of community benefits of somebody getting some housing development. They have to give a certain amount of money or support to that community. So this is from a long time back, actually, I think, this money. So it was used to put up the mural, and that went out to a competition. And again, used a local dark horse tattoo and a local sign writer called Ross Hastie came together with the competition winner in the end. It was stanza competition. So that whole process happened, and so some of the money was put towards bringing back the toilet back to life. So this is a big building. Actually repurposing and regenerating is relatively low cost and low emissions in terms of making it come to life. But how do you run it? You know, the council haven't got any money to run this. So how do you make it a viable social enterprise that will also provide us a toilet from the start? And we wanted to explore a new idea, which is something called a community benefit society. So this is actually something that brings people invest in. So you get community investors, you can get community organisations investing in a project. It's often used for wind farms or the last shop in the village. It's been done for distilleries, it's done for hotels. Here it's a bit unusual, it's a wee bit of mix of everything. And that's what we created this new venue. So it was an investment, that's what helps. So the capital investment came through the Scotland's Towns Fund, which is Scottish Government delivered by the council. The actual investment into the organisation that runs it, which is both a community benefit society and a charity, has come from local people. So we raised about £15,000, between £15,000 and £20,000. Anybody can still buy a share, they're £20, and it's not money that you're giving forever. You can get it out in the future. It's just like any share that you buy, that you can get the money back. You are locked in for 3 years to allow us to get ourselves established and bring our own funding streams in. But after that, you can, at the discretion of the Board of Trustees, you can get the money out in the future. So it really is something, you know, anybody can buy a share locally, they can invest in this. We've now got a public toilet. We also have a shower, which we hope will start to be used by maybe outdoor mountain bikers, anybody who's maybe travelling coming into town, cycling out to Demyat, climbing
commuters,
Demyat.
I suppose, because you're right next to the train station as well.
Yeah, absolutely. We're in the workshop area, which is what we call the workshop, but this is actually used for family learning activities during the holidays. So we had Easter bonnet making, we've got all sorts of things lined up for the summer. We've got coding classes for kids. We hope will be run by some kids from Menstrie Primary. We've got cooking classes, we're going to have craft classes, lots of different activities for families to come along to free of charge.
Because it is a really impressive building.
It is.
It's lovely to sit in as well, but you've got the shop that we can see
Yeah.
through from us at the moment,
Yeah.
where I've already had a little look around before we were producing this podcast, and there's lovely, it looks at all, it's all local.
That's the aim.
There's
It's
the whiskey
something called-
barrel
yeah.
gifts and stuff, which are really obviously have a clear
Yeah.
link to Alloa.
Yeah, so that was the whole point of the shop, is to really promote local products and
Yeah.
local produce, but also active travel. So we've got pocketbooks. The most popular item that we sell is the Ockles walking book, which
Yeah.
gives you some idea. Which, you know, tourists are coming in, they're picking up the book, and they're taking, you know, they're setting off up the hills and staying in Alloa. That's what we want people to do: stay in Clackmannanshire, spend their money in Clackmannanshire. That's the
Yeah.
whole point. So if we don't catch them as walkers, we hope to catch them buying, I don't know, soaps from Siaban, which is a local soap and company. We've got melts now from a company in Men Street. We've got Dog. We've got Kelso and Titch, I think they're called, which is a local. I better get that right, actually.
That's okay.
Yeah. They've got a local company that produce dog treats. We've got Recycled Wood, and we've got Forth Valley Men's Shed, both with lovely wood items. And we're really looking for anybody else who would like to have their products. And we've got a new branding developed called Made in Clacks.
Yeah.
Which will be coming out. Oh, Counter Roast Coffee. They're in dollar, so they're fantastic.
get
If you want to
all
buy
the
your
plugs
coffee, if you want to buy beautiful, fantastic coffee that's ground and blended here in Clackmannanshire, then come down here and buy it. So that's the focus. It's really, and so that's we're focusing on supporting local businesses. It doesn't need to be third sector, although we're a charity. We're also, supporting local businesses and keeping that money in the area, keeping that support in the area, trying to get people we want the people who have shares to earn some interest in the future.
Yeah.
That's the whole point of it. And as a tourist attraction, it's a great starting point. We've got the Clackmannanshire tapestry on the wall, which is really telling the story of everything that's going on. Everything from the different towers to Japanese garden to lots of other things that you can visit locally, told around through the tapestry on the wall. And that's the starting point. We've got a big map that can show where cycleways, walkways, where to go and where all the walks are that are in the books. There's good reason for tourists to pop up from Glasgow, then get on a train, can be here, pop in, get some information, and off they travel. And we want to keep them spending their money in Clackmannanshire.
Yeah, and it's fantastic to hear your passion about it when you're talking about it as well, because it really is such a great space. But something I want to finish up on then is just what you've touched on, which is this whole idea that Paul was talking about in the first part of our podcast, which was the cyclical nature of the economy. So we were talking about community wealth building, so wealth that is generated in Clackmannanshire coming back and being used for the good of the community in Clackmannanshire. And this is a really good example of that, because as you say, it's trying to keep that in. Is there anything you want to add on that kind of cyclical nature of it?
Yeah, we tried very hard to make sure it was local builders. So local builders got the contracts from the outset, that there's some community benefit built in there. So procurement is one of the pillars.
Yeah,
for example,
and Paul was just mentioning procurement as well.
Creating jobs, for example, we have 2 new jobs that we've created here, both fair wage jobs. So that again is one of the pillars. But in addition to that, we've got volunteering roles. So of the 5 volunteers that have started, we only opened in October, 2 of them have moved on to tourist jobs. So, again, hopefully they're getting that training here, they're getting good understanding of learning in a relatively quiet atmosphere at the moment. Hopefully it's going to get busier. One of the other aspects is that investment, that community investment, and how you use different investment models in using community wealth building. I think we've got a really vibrant social enterprise sector as well. So Alloa Hub is just one of 180 social enterprises across Forth Valley. We have a really established Forth Valley social enterprise network, and we have an online directory. So if anybody wants to find out how they can buy social, buy good, we call it, buy local, then go onto the directory, and that's a good starting point. And we've become a social enterprise place this year. So we've been recognised nationally by Social Enterprise Scotland. We have a slightly different, I know part of community wealth building is the cooperative model. So this is the nearest you get as a BENCOM, I think, in Clackmannanshire so far, because I don't think we have any cooperatives as such. But this is a really, other than obviously our fantastic credit union, this is a really good starting point. So if you want to put just 20 quid, buy a share, get that investment behind us, then you can go online at allowafirst.co.uk to their online shop, a marketplace, and you can buy the share online. So really get behind.
Anthea, you're a fantastic promoter. It's great. But it's really good, just to finish up then, to hear that when we talked about that kind of cyclical economy type model, that it's not just money, but it's also skills, and it's better outcomes for our community. So it's not just there is a nice building where you can buy nice things, which you can, which you've said loads about, which is brilliant, but also that it's helping out local people, and it's reinvesting those and hoping to take people on to further destinations with new skills, which is great for Clackmannanshire. Anthea, you've been fantastic today. Thank you for joining us in this brilliant location. And I think we'll call it there for today. Thank you. You've made it to the end. Thanks for joining us for this episode. Our guests were Paul Morris and Anthea Coulter, and your host was Ali Hare. This podcast was created by the Workforce Development and Learning team at Clackmannanshire Council and is produced by Adam Piru.